So I'm very pleased to welcome you all to the IAU webinar on integrating the SDGs in higher education. The webinar forms part of a webinar series that the IAU initiated in the period of marked by COVID-19, and we started in the spring. And the webinar series is entitled The Future of Higher Education, Short, Medium, and Long Term. As you know, and as you may know, and otherwise will discover, the International Association of Universities has been involved in developing initiatives around sustainable development since the early 90s, and since the launch of the Brundtland report that actually called many governments and all stakeholders around the world to pay more attention to the issues that are of common importance around the world, and thus work more towards a more sustainable future. And since the early 90s, we've developed all kinds of activities also relating to work that Alexander Leicht will have the opportunity to explain, i.e. the work of UNESCO in fostering, in particular, education for sustainable development. So the IAU webinar series on the future of higher education allows us to discuss many very important issues that are actually on the agenda of higher education institutions around the world. And we focused in particular, for instance, on the changing dynamics of internationalization, especially also in times of COVID-19. We looked at the impact of COVID-19 on higher education at large. We had a webinar focusing specifically on the future of values upon which to build better higher education, and zoomed in on academic freedom issues. We have looked at strategy development in higher education and how these strategies could and should involve sustainable development dynamics more, and many other issues that are actually challenges, but also opportunities for universities today. Today, we're very honored and pleased to discuss different ways of integrating the SDGs in higher education. And you will see no one size fits all. There are many different ways of doing it, and there are many different ways of engaging with the sustainable development goals. And we thank the three speakers for having accepted our invitation to speak and show what they actually do from many different perspectives. Alexander Leicht is the Chief of Section at the Education for Sustainable Development division at UNESCO, and he will explain how UNESCO has worked on different aspects of sustainable development, but also how it has fostered a lot of better attention of all people involved in education for sustainable development from early stages to lifelong. And he's been involved with these projects a long time as well. And so it's a great honor to have been able to also work as an international association with UNESCO on certain aspects of the work of UNESCO there. Shakuntala Laskar is a senior professor at Assam Don Bosco University in India. Welcome to our panel. Very pleased to have you speak on something that we even had to look up more specifically, and it is the dynamics around SDG 7 in particular, energy, and how there is a new terminology for us, and that is called hydrel. So how hydro energy transforms into electricity. And this is to zoom in on a very particular component or a contribution of a university to research on how to improve energy use for the future of our planet. Your cluster work is linked to SDG 13, also climate action, 15 as well, life on Earth. And so you will show also how the different SDGs are not to be seen in silo, but certainly also connect, and will allow to go more in depth into multidisciplinary approach and dynamics that are so important for all of us to use in order to better face the challenges that we face. And last but not least, and this is not the order in which every speaker will be speaking, but still, Charles Hopkins from York University. You hold a UNESCO chair on reorienting education towards sustainable development, and that is work that we have admired long-term as well, because you have really been able to shake and move higher education around the world to address the issues that are on the table and need to be looked at in very proactive ways. And you will help us look into those and share a lot of the wisdom that you have gathered over time and can share with the people here. You're also, both of you, Chuck and Shakuntala, both from York University and Assam Don Bosco, two universities heavily and very positively involved in the IAU Global Cluster on Higher Education and Research for Sustainable Development. And that is of importance to us as well, as you generate the kind of dynamics that allow to link the different parts of the world on issues that are so important for the future of all. So you all three make the case for the importance of research as well, the importance of higher education, to be seen as one of the key stakeholders in the whole process to engage with Agenda 2030 and to make sure that the goals have any chance to be met by 2030 or later. And that will also be very important to look at. So no one size fits all, that is for sure. So you will show that diversity always are essential. They're complementary in many different ways. And what is important is to share about it and to also see how we can engage in a conversation with the many participants from around the world and to see how they relate to the different presentations that you will make. I'm now very pleased to give the floor to Isabelle Thoman, with whom I have the pleasure to work here at the IAU in Paris, and who heads much of the work that we do in the context of the IAU Global Cluster on higher education and research for sustainable development. So Isabelle, the floor is yours, and I will get back to you later. Before I do so, however, just 1 second still, please do put all your questions in the chat. We will look at the questions and we will try to do our best to respond to all those we can. You know as well that the speakers each have 10 to 15 minutes to speak, and then there is time for constructive discussion towards the end. Rest assured that we will also note all the questions down and share them with the speakers if there are questions that we could not address during the conversation we will have at the end of the presentations. So each of the speakers will have 10 to 15 minutes to present their points to the webinar, and then we will dig deeper in a conversation, also looking at the questions that you have shared. So thank you very much. The floor is yours, Isabelle.
Thank you. Also, a warm welcome from me, from the IAU in Paris. I'm very pleased that we have such a good round of speakers here, and I think we will have a really interesting discussion. From my side, as I'm working as Program Officer for Higher Education and Sustainable Development, HESD at IAU, I would just like to give a brief introduction of what we are doing at IAU with this topic. So sustainable development is one of IAU's key strategic priorities, and our activities regarding that include a global portal where we showcase and also demonstrate what universities are doing. We are conducting surveys on higher education and sustainability at universities globally. And we also have several publications and events that we are working with our member universities and with the IAU Global Cluster. Hilla just had already been mentioning, we have 2 cluster representatives here today. We have York University in Toronto, and we have Assam Don Bosco University in India. So here you see a nice world map of how we distributed the SDGs over all continents. And we did launch this cluster at IAU in 2018 already, with the aim to just connect all the activities that are already out there. We have each institution leading one of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and then they work with their respective partner universities in satellite clusters, in so-called sub-clusters. So the goal for all of these universities involved in the cluster, it's around 80 in total, is to really bring sustainable development in higher education and research forward, and to promote the role of universities for Agenda 2030. And within this cluster, we are developing approaches for collaboration, for joint research projects, but also really share the experiences of how to work with the SDGs on an institutional level, in their strategic plan, in their leadership, but also for teaching how to put the SDGs in the curricula or in campus operation or in projects that universities do with their local communities. So within this cluster, we really have two concrete objectives, which is to work as a research and networking hub for universities that are working with the SDGs, but also for those that are new to this approach of working with sustainability in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And then, of course, we also serve a bit as this global voice for higher education and sustainable development at the UN level, at the government level, really stressing that higher education and universities do play a role. They do contribute to sustainable development and to society. So this is just a very brief introduction to the work we are doing. And I think you will see later, and we can also put that in the chat, the links to the IAU Global Cluster. You can see on this map that we have several universities involved there. It's a bit small, but we make sure to send you the link as well later on. And for any questions on that, please do not hesitate to come back to us in the end. Just without any further ado, I want to give the floor to our great speakers, and we will start with Alexander Leicht, the Chief of the Education Section at UNESCO. So Alexander, please go ahead. This was just a brief introduction from us, and we're happy to hear your part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Thank you very much, Hillige. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for giving UNESCO the floor. I start with just briefly mentioning once more how we appreciate the idea of setting up this cluster and to bringing universities together, really using the SDGs as a matrix. This is really, I think, a very, very important step to making the work at the higher education level for sustainable development for the SDGs more strategic and more systematic. What I will do in the minutes I have is just to briefly present this new framework that we have for education for sustainable development that our member states through a very deep consultation process developed, our member states governments, but also then many other stakeholders, non-governmental stakeholders, practitioners, teachers networks, higher education networks. This new framework, we call it ESD for 2030, was adopted by our member states last autumn, and we are now in the process of rolling it out. A little bit, of course, hindered by the pandemic situation. So instead of having a big launch conference in the summer of this year, in June this year, we will have a big conference next year, and we are now in a way soft launching this new framework due to the current situation. So basically, I start really with maybe just saying a few words about our general approach to education for sustainable development. And Isabel, I think that's the next slide, if you could show that. And that would be that, of course, education for sustainable development, the next one actually, education for sustainable development really for us means integrating knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes into education, those knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes that really empower everyone to contribute to sustainable development. That concerns all levels of the education system, and it also concerns all types of education, formal education, non-formal education, informal learning. We very much emphasize the three learning dimensions of cognitive, socio-emotional, behavioral, and we always emphasize, you can see that a little bit, it's not easy to read, but a little bit reflected here on the on this image. We emphasize that the cognitive learning dimension is, of course, very important to get the basic facts about sustainable development and the sustainable development challenges. But the ultimate goal of this type of education is really action in the real world, behavior change at the various levels. This is also why in this new framework, and you can also see this here reflected in this maybe not so easy to read slide, is that we very much emphasize the big transformation that needs to happen if we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and that education needs to contribute to its transformation at two different levels. One level is really the individual level. How can I acquire the relevant skills and also the right kind of motivation to, at the individual level, change my life towards sustainable development, to put it in a simple way like that. But it's very important to emphasize that we cannot stop and stay at the individual level. We also need to look at the big societal transformation that is necessary, and that's probably the more important level even than the purely individual level. So what we emphasize very much are also citizenship skills for sustainability. What do I need as an individual to become engaged with the wider societal political process where the big decisions for sustainable development are made, and that brings together very much also citizenship education, the skills that citizenship education provides, and education for sustainable development. So that's the first point. Really, I wanted to emphasize the second point with this new framework that we are making is really education for sustainable development. And Isabel, that's the next slide, is relevant for the achievement of all the 17 SDGs. You may see on our website we have a relatively popular document that spells out learning objectives for each of the 17 SDGs and cross-cutting competencies. We've tried to summarize this one, with this one 60-page document here on this one slide. That's also not very easy to read, but I think you get the basic idea that education for sustainable development really leads to specific achievements, let's say, for each of the 17 SDGs. Again, as reflected here at the center of the slide, along the three learning dimensions of cognitive, social, emotional, and behavioral. So education for sustainable development for all the 17 SDGs. That's the second important point that our member states and all other stakeholders have agreed for this new framework or this new strategy. We also think that that education for sustainable development is very well placed to talk about the different and facilitate learning about the different interlinkages between the different SDGs. And I think that is also very evident, and as is widely discussed, there are also certain tensions or possible trade-offs between the different SDGs about economic development on the one hand, conservation on the other hand, for example. So there's a lot of negotiation, a lot of learning at the whole society level necessary to achieve all the 17 SDGs equally. And we believe that the specific learning approach that education for sustainable development provides helps us to deal with these interlinkages and this also with these possible trade-offs and tensions. Now, when it comes to the implementation of this new, if we move away sort of more from the concept, but move towards the implementation, on the next slide, you will see that we have identified 5 action areas to build on the previous framework or program we had that we used to call the Global Action Program, and under which we also worked with IAU, of course, in higher education. So we have further developed, but largely maintained these 5 priority action areas that have been identified as the key areas where we need to see change in order to make education more sustainable or bring education overall in line with education for sustainable development. The first one is to creating the right kind of policy environment for this type of education that we want to promote, both in the area of the education policies, but then also with regard to the policies that are connected to specific sustainable development sectors, the climate sector, for example. The second action area targets education institutions and looks at how can the education institution be transformed into a a space where learning for sustainable development is possible, not only through teaching and learning content, but also through the way the institution is organized. The third area is a self-evident one, building capacities of educators, teachers, educators at all levels as learning facilitators for sustainable development. Here also, of course, higher education has a crucial role to play as the space where teachers and future educators are educated. Young people, youth groups, especially with regard to non-formal education, as the fourth action area, with the emphasis to see young people here not only as a target group, but really as the ones who themselves can drive education and can drive learning. And the fifth action area, where in a way all 5 areas come together, is at the local level. How can we at the local level, through the local networks, but also through local government, facilitate learning for sustainable development in the community level. So this is basically the matrix through which we have been and will be developing activities together with all our partners, such as IAU, such as different universities, but also then, of course, partners in areas beyond higher education, because as I've emphasized, the work concerns really all levels and all types all levels of the education system and all types of education. From UNESCO, just to finish my short overview, because I see also my time is coming to an end, we will emphasize very much providing support at the country level. And we will try to, or we are trying to identify a number of countries where there's a particular also political will, and where there's a particular threshold to generate education for sustainable development activities under this new framework. And we will try to provide support to those countries in order to achieve the progress there. We will also set up, or we are setting up, building on the previous work, a network of stakeholders at the regional and the global levels in order to facilitate exchange of good practices. We are doing research in order to track issues and trends to make sure that the implementation is evidence informed. We are also trying to engage, of course, in resource mobilization, because this is always has been and still under-resourced area of work. And then part of our responsibility is also to track the progress globally, in line with UNESCO's role as the official sort of reporting agency, the custodian agency for the global indicator for target 4.7 of the Sustainable Development Goal 4, the target that includes ESD. I stop here. That was my very, hopefully not too rushed overview of our new framework, sort of the key ideas behind it, but then also the areas where we are planning to implement it. And I'm sure we can come back to some of the points later in the questions. Thanks a lot. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Alexander, for this presentation and this overview of what UNESCO is doing, and especially stressing the citizen side and this need for transformation and the interplay between and interlinkages between the SDGs. I think also in a university context, we will get back to this topic and get back also to the links you sent here. We can also see more information on the UNESCO part. And also for our participants that have been asking, we will be sending the slides and the recording later on. So don't worry if you don't manage to write them down now. They will be made available later on the IAU page. So now I would like to give the floor to Charles Hopkins, the UNESCO chair in reorientating education, reorienting towards sustainability, from York University in Toronto. Charles, are you able to switch on your video, or do we have you join by sound?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have a terrible internet connection here, so it'll have to just be sound alone.
Okay, we hear you just fine. So that is good. Then thank you, and the floor is yours.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, and thanks for this opportunity. I'd like to begin with just a couple of opening remarks. One about the context of this webinar. You know, I'm thinking back, the history of UNESCO teaming up with IAU regarding the role of higher education in the quest for a sustainable future really goes back a long time. I recalled I was present at global meetings organized by IAU and UNESCO with university leaders as far back as 1991 in Halifax. And then later in parallel sessions at the Earth Summit in Rio, we met, and later again in Quebec City, all seeking and trying to outline the roles for higher education. Today, of course, the rationale for the engagement of higher education goes beyond the original research and training of science professionals that the UN requested in Agenda 21. But it's realizing the potential of reaching a much broader audience and actually preparing tomorrow's leaders. We know that a very small percentage of people actually get to go to higher education, about 8%, but that 8% will become 80% of the leaders and shapers of society of tomorrow. So this leveraging role of higher education and the relevance of ESD, as Alexander's slide pointed out, is not just recognized by UNESCO, but by the UN as a whole, and not just limited to SDG 4, but to quote the UN saying, as a key enabler of all of the SDGs. I think even beyond that, philosophically speaking, with position ESD as a new purpose of education. You know, it needs to be included in the essential discussions that are emerging. COVID, restructuring of basic education and education at all levels, fundamental questioning of why are we educating people and so on. So just as opening remarks to think of this in context. So slide, please. Yeah, thanks. One of the was creating subclusters for resource building, research, and networking hubs. So what I'd like to do is to look at one of the particular clusters, and that's subcluster 4. Our members are Charles University in the Czech Republic, the International Islamic University in Malaysia, Leuphana University in Germany, Rhodes University in South Africa, and the University of Peace in Costa Rica, as well as our university, York University in Canada. The thing is that they are all well established, they're well connected globally, and the subcluster itself benefits from the networks that are within each of these 6 members. The overarching plan is to target higher education senior leadership, the executive management, the senior decision makers who have the resources and the responsibility to act. So our work is focusing then on ESD at the core of a quality education and looking into a whole institution approach towards sustainability. So this subcluster 4 is collaborating in activities such as creating executive material on the history and the evolution as it emerges of the whole institution approach in higher ed, sharing best practices, experiences, and proven benefit. You can see that it's also about advising universities and colleges on change strategies. It's about addressing sustainability in student and faculty mobility in higher ed. This is an emerging one, very important. Revising our thoughts of mobility for both students and faculty. Rethinking how to enhance the feeling of global citizenship. Being in solidarity with the other. Emotional experiences, connectedness, all of this, which we have been taking part in mobility and internationalizing higher education, but now considering it in the context of the ecological footprint of this, the pandemic, the cost, the effort. So we need to rethink all of this aspect. And so the cluster will be hosting a major virtual conference in January around World Education Day. So you can watch for that. So, but I would like to point out that within each of these subclusters, there's no additional resources. So each of our activities has to be reframed and repurposing existing resources and efforts. So I thank everybody all of the institutions who have accepted this responsibility. The second slide, please. So let's look at sort of an example of how one university is developing their whole institution approach in a context of it almost being a research approach. At York specifically, there's a long history of addressing the elements of sustainability, dating back to York being one of the original signatories of the Halifax Declaration, as I mentioned, in 1991. They have a long history of looking into diversity, social justice, environmental consciousness, atmospheric research linked to climate change. Their MBAs engaged with sustainability, public health, and so on. York University is already recognized as an international leader in the SDGs around relevant research, teaching, partnerships, and certainly campus practices. Now, building on this, York has moved ahead with an academic plan from 2020 to 2025. So this new academic plan with advancing the sustainable development goals that encapsulates the whole initiative, as you can see from the diagram with the symbol of the SDGs surrounding everything. This blueprint for action with the 6 priority areas elevates York University's action to contribute to the UN, to the SDGs. But as you can see, the issues are 21st century learning, knowledge for the future, beyond access to higher education to actual success, advancing global engagement, partnering, and living well together. It means addressing a whole institution approach towards sustainability, and this encapsulates then not only teaching and research and community service, but the operations, purchasing, food, transportation, internationalization as schemes, investments, and so on. And to do this requires dialogue and engagement on all faculty and staff. So this means building on a comprehensive sustainability strategy that we already had in 2017, and to come is a revised internationalization and global outreach strategy with SDGs as an anchor. Now, I must say, ranking and the Times Higher Education and so on have influenced and have helped. And what it is doing now is building a dialogue regarding the real criteria beyond what is listed in Times Higher Education that we should focus on to better serve our students in the community now and later throughout their entire lives. Slide 3, please. So this next slide is again a specific micro look at a crucial role that UNESCO plays in embedding sustainability in higher education. That is the establishment of the UNITWIN UNESCO chairs. Alexander's presentation mentions about contributing to strengthening ESD through research, both quantitative and qualitative research from global networks. And highlight one of these aspects, and that's working with the UNESCO chairs. These UNESCO chairs, as you can see, the concept was established in 1992 with originally 700 institutions from 116 countries that it has grown to be today. It promotes North, South, 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 and so on collaboration. The chairs are sort of think tanks and bridge builders between the academic world, civil society, and local communities mainly working through research and now focusing more on policy making. The idea is to collaborate and to address the pressing challenges that are of concerns with the UN and UNESCO, and to contribute to the development of their societies. So overall, it really enhances the capacity of higher education as a contributor. If you look at the picture inside, this was a meeting of the German UNESCO chairs in Wuppertal earlier this year, where they were creating a German collaborative plan, integrating the work of all of the chairs, spanning social sciences, environmental sciences, and the different accents in a collaborative way. I want to thank UNESCO for the interconnectedness now in the new ESD for 2030 plan of connecting all of the priority areas so that those who become the partners, the ESD net, will be able to work collaboratively across all 5 priority areas. This is important because you can't just isolate one from the others. Our UNESCO chair, when looking at this idea of research and contributing to policy, the other part of the slide talks about 2 research networks that have been reformed and are poised, ready to collaborate on ESD for 2030s is research networks. One of them is the International Network of Teacher Education Institutions. That spans roughly 50 countries, looking at how to embed ESD in teacher education. And the other big network, also spanning roughly 50 countries, is looking into how ESD could help to improve the education of the least well-served people in the world by their education systems, and that is the world's indigenous. So in closing, the idea of collaboration, working together between the IAU clusters, the unit twin programs, and so on, building on research and training to reach all who attend through higher education, not only through the teaching, but also through what our institutions themselves model. We're adding policy advice, actively pursuing a global voice for higher education. The research, now looking at sustainability science as a collection of natural and social sciences and so on, in a participatory way to develop policy. And then lastly, I'd like to comment that SDG 17 is about creating and engaging partnerships. The partnership of UNESCO, IAU, and the thousands of higher education institutions, their faculty and professional staff, have much to offer the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. Let's get their voice when national governments and local and regional governments are developing their implementation strategies. Let's be at the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles, for this presentation and also presenting the work that the SDG 4 cluster is doing and spreading a bit of light on this big UNESCO Unit Twin network. And I think we all very much agree to the importance of partnerships, and seeing all these international participants joining today shows the willingness to work together across borders. And I think that's really what we need. And now, last but not least, I would like to give the floor to our third speaker, which is Shakuntala Lester from Don Bosco University in India. And she will zoom in on the work of her university for the SDGs, particularly SDG 7. Shakuntala, the floor is yours. I will mute myself now to avoid the echo.
Thank you very much. Warm greetings from Assam Don Bosco University. I am happy to present here some aspects of what we in Assam Don Bosco University are doing to make SDG goals visible to our faculty and students. First of all, the SDG 3 is about the health and well-being. Assam Don Bosco University is committed to supporting communities belonging to around 145 villages, mostly tribal, in the vicinity of our campus in Tapesia, Sonapur, towards sustainable development. We operate a mobile dispensary in the form of a van stuffed with qualified medical healthcare workers and medical social work practitioners. They provide primary medical care to those living in underserved areas and have limited or no accessibility to healthcare facilities. Social workers associated with the university reach out to the people, involving local communities and organizing awareness for healthcare. Apart from providing free medical consultancy, we make available basic medicines at minimal cost. Then it's about this SDG 4, the quality education. Our university students provide free tutorial classes for the school students of the neighboring villages. With the guidance of our faculty, they also conduct sessions on life skills, personality development, and career guidance to address the educational needs of the adults and children in the neighboring villages. These programs are organized in each of our 3 campuses and reaches out to more than 100 children in each of the campuses. In the engineering college campus, the program is called Swastayan, which is commitment to eradicate inequalities in society through education. The Master of Business Administration students conduct a similar program called Prajwal, lighting lives through education. SDG 5, which is about gender equality. Our university launched an initiative in adult education for village women with the strategy Educate to Empower. The initiative encompasses a 6-month certificate program in basic English, reading and writing, and workshops on career guidance, enabling them to guide their children, child development and parenting, nutrition and balanced diet, physical health, communicable and non-communicable diseases, mental health, and human rights. Then about the SDG 6, this is about clean water and sanitation. Assam Don Bosco University had conducted a participatory rural appraisal in 12 villages. Next slide. This is SDG 6 slide for clean water and sanitation.
Sorry, was this slide, or which one would you like me to put?
It's about SDG 6. Next. This one. A participatory rural appraisal in 12 villages in the vicinity of its campus. Based on this, the Center of Excellence in Nanotechnology at our university developed low-cost solar-powered water purifiers. They utilize green technology for filtration and purification of ground and surface water. The filtration unit includes sand and gravel for the removal of particulate matter. The adsorption unit has activated charcoal and nano-absorbing material for absorbing metal ions. Apart from allocating a solar-powered water purifier to each of the 12 villages, interested, educated, and unemployed village youth have been trained to maintain these purifiers in their villages. The training also had the aim of enhancing the entrepreneurial capability of the village youth. European Union Ambassador to India, Thomas Kozlowski, in his visit to the university, inaugurated this project. He congratulated the university for its role in making pure drinking water available to the poor. The next one is about the SDGs 10, which is reduced inequality. Swabalamban, or self-help, is a project of the university for training educated up to 10 standard unemployed youth in technical job-oriented skills for employment opportunities in electrical and electronics, information technology hardware, installation and maintenance of power backup systems, and computer application training. Till date, 100 young people have been trained and certified in such practical job-oriented technical training. This program has been acknowledged by the International Association of University as a best practice in a survey among 120 educational institutions worldwide in Sustainable Development Goal 10 of reduced inequalities. Then next one is about SDG 13, so climate action. Yes. This agroforestry, forestry and conservation of biodiversity. For the conservation of healthy ecosystems, the university has embarked on plantation drives spread over 190 acres of its campus at Tapesia. The variegated cropping of tea, coconut, rubber, cocoa, cashew nut, agar, ginger, and turmeric have been established as livelihood projects, as well as demonstration farms and seed gardens. The university also launched a greening initiative which involves planting and custodianship of tree samplings by individual students who will pass on the nurturing of the trees to the next batch of students prior to leaving the university. Water conservation and supply management. The university has invested enormous resources to harvest rainwater at a macro level. It has created a major reservoir spread over 10 acres and 5 minor reservoirs, each of 1 acre or more in area, by tapping small streams in the campus. Drinking water is obtained from 5 deep bore wells. The next slide is on this life on land. The campus has a natural forest cover and is the refuge of varied endemic species of wildlife. The university land is demarcated by boundary pillars without fences or barriers to allow the unhindered movement of animals and their access to water sources and foliage. This is about the SDG 17, which is Partnership for Goals. The university has a large network of 22 collaborative activities in research, 61 linkages with institutions, industries for internship, on-the-job training, project work, and sharing of research facilities. It also has 38 MOUs with important national and international institutions and universities, and linkages with industries and corporate for academic activities, research, and career opportunities for students. So now I shall be switching on to ADVU and SDG 7 and about the research in energy efficiency. The targets for SDG 7 includes access to affordable and reliable energy, increased use of renewable energy, improving energy efficiency, clean energy research, etc. So Assam Don Bosco University is the cluster lead for SDG 7. University has installed 320 kilowatt grid connected solar photovoltaic power system by using the free rooftop spaces. This has reduced the energy cost by 16 to 20%. The installation of a facility for generating micro hydroelectric power up to 15 kilowatt is underway. The university is focusing on energy efficiency. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Government of India, has been mandated to help 100 existing buildings achieve net zero energy building status. That is a building with energy performance index less than 15 kilowatt hour per meter square per year. EDBU is one of the 100 buildings to be assessed by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. The assessment has been completed and we will soon get a roadmap to achieve near zero energy building. The university is undertaking research in the generation of affordable energy from new and renewable sources in a cost-effective manner, targeted for use in rural areas of the country. Some of the selected ongoing research areas in the field of energy are this is about the generation from bio-waste. This is one successful model of energy generation, which is called cow dung battery. And it has got great relevance in rural setup, considering the low cost. When series-connected discharge batteries are placed in a basin containing some cow dung and salt water and exposed to sunlight, the positive and negative charges produced in the solution are collected in the series-connected batteries to produce a current. Thus, the batteries get recharged. So the efficiency can be enhanced by adding sulfuric acid in it. There is another research, just I will mention, this is about the development of a novel algorithm to increase the performance of photovoltaic array in partial shading condition. This project presents a technique to configure the modules in the PV array to enhance the generated power from the array under partial shading condition. The theoretical results obtained using simulation studies demonstrate a significant power improvement in the proposed configuration with respect to the TCT configuration. Then I just mentioned that there's the research in the undergraduate level about the development of a solar-powered steam turbine generator, which is a renewable energy technology having the ability to provide electricity. The solar-powered steam turbine generator was designed and built based on collecting solar energy using a Fresnel lens, so that the heat is created in the fluid in a reservoir to high temperature to produce steam, which drives a turbine coupled to the generator. There is also incorporation of a solar tracker using Arduino, which tracks the maximum light intensity at a particular point of time. So this is just mentioned about the research going on in the Assam Don Bosco University about energy efficiency. So I'm coming to conclude.
If you
Yes.
to wrap up, please, it would be great. Thank you.
Pardon?
Could we ask you to have some final words and wrap up so we can move on and don't go over time? That would be great.
I'm just coming to the conclusion.
Okay, perfect.
The pandemic impact has not been, not been able to dampen the spirit of the university community. Teaching and learning continued through online classes in the last spring semester using different platforms like Google Classroom, Google Meet, Skype, etc. This autumn semester 2020 has also started in the virtual mode. From the experience of the last spring semester, we are looking for greater effectiveness in the teaching learning process. We have adopted service learning as a strategy in the teaching and learning activities in all the university. This provides an opportunity for learners to enhance their understanding of concepts and theories into practical environment. Though apparently similar to volunteerism and internship, it's different from this. It's more focused on enhancing a student's understanding of theoretical knowledge through service experience in community and reflection on that experience. So I come to the end, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of Assam Don Bosco University and what you are doing here about the SDG goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shakuntala, for sharing these very important projects and showing how you can really work with the SDGs in the community. I think it's important to see how you can put one SDG into an actual project and help also people in your region and locally and connect that to the teaching at the university. So now I would like to move on to the more interactive and discussion part between our journalists, our panelists. And I would give the floor again to Hilij Vanland, our IAU Secretary General, who will moderate this discussion. And thank you again to the participants for the questions in the chat. We will get to them in a minute, but now we will commence the discussion with these questions. Hilij, thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel. And thank you very much, Chuck, Alexander, and Shakuntala for these very interesting presentations. I think in common, I see that there is a real wish to showcase how the education sector engages with the SDGs and how they actually develop new strategies to build it in the strategy itself of education institutions. But two overarching questions could be the following ones that I will pose as generic ones to each of you and invite you 2 minutes, during 2 minutes to react to. And then I will take some of the questions from the chat box as well. So how do you believe that higher education or education institutions at large can contribute to integrating sustainable development or education for sustainable development strategies in national policies as well? Because to build it in at the institutional level is one thing, but as you said also, Alexander, in the beginning, you work with member states and you also help them to develop the strategies that are required to scale up activities that are being developed by others. So it would be interesting to see if we can come back to the national policies and national strategies to actually foster sustainable development. The second broader question would be more specific to universities, yet again linking up national strategies with those actors in society that can make the difference. And here, how actually to better equip universities and other higher education institutions with more theoretical and practical tools to actually go to the next step and transform the teaching into something that would be more adequate to address the challenges we face, into transforming the research landscape, the research agendas of institutions, of countries, and also look at how to transform the institutional mindset, something that was also stressed very strongly by Chuck in his presentation, because it is actually at all the different levels that education institutions, and I broaden the scope here because UNESCO is not working only at higher education level, but at all the levels, but how to actually ensure that these institutions are properly equipped to help foster the transformation and the new mindset required in order to ensure we are going into a more sustainable future. So broad questions, 2 minutes will never allow you to answer to those in detail, but maybe your reactions, and let's go backwards, and then maybe Shakuntala first.
Education contribute to integrate sustainable development strategies in national policies. In fact, Government of India is taking much care about introducing different programs for the sustainable development. For example, the Swachhata Vision, there is a which actually for I mean the cleanliness drive. It's a cleanliness drive, and then and they claim that the government claims that then out of the states of the country, the eight states are already there. SDG index. That's SDG index is more than 65. And there is no state which is below 50. So this is the statistics they have shown. So therefore, in the national policies, I think it's going on the right direction. And so it's, I think, in the right direction. So we can, the universities have to take care of this, the mindsets. They have to work on the mindsets of the common people, and that is very important. Yeah. So the common people must be aware of the SDG goals, and that's, we have to spread the message of that is with us, because unless and until we make the common people aware of these goals, then nothing is going to happen. So that is the feeling I have for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alexander, may I give you the floor to maybe address one or two broader questions, or try to combine them?
Yeah, thank you very much, Iligi. I can try just to say a few words about it. So I think the first one is about the national policies. Of course, it's as I also tried to briefly say in my contribution, it's key to get the broader policy framework right in order to advance education for sustainable development. And here, I think the key strategy is really forceful advocacy. Higher education institutions are key members of a society, are key for the future of a society as those who train future leaders or the future workforce more generally of a society. So I think there is a certain leverage that higher education institutions, university presidents have with regard to national policy makers. And I think it is a lot about really making the case right, evidence informed about how important it is for the future of the country, say, to integrate sustainable development at all levels. So I think there's no magic kind of solution to it. So I think for me, really, I would say advocacy, really a very, very good advocacy strategy is key. And of course, the more higher education institutions team up for that, the better it is. And that's why also IAU's work and similar organizations' work is so important. It brings different institutions together. Very briefly on the second question, there's also not the one perfect answer. I think what we find is that there's still not enough well-documented examples out there of universities who really implement the whole institution approach at all the different levels: facilities management, education content, education methodology, in an integral way. Of course, we know you have mapped many organizations, many institutions are doing that, but there's not enough really systematic mapping that allows organizations to learn from each other and to use the learning from each other, the good practice exchange, as a kind of tool for further development. So that's my very quick response to that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chuck, would you like to also pick up on one of the questions or both?
Yes, I think those recommendations are excellent and right to the point. Regarding the first one, I think the knowledge that universities have around the social sciences, it would be an important contribution. You know, of politicians, for them to really be on the cutting edge and to bring in policies that aren't already supported politically in the general public. It's very difficult. So they need the credibility of the universities, their voice to be there. Also, I think the role of the modeling. A university of 40, 50,000 is like a small town. And you can measure the flows and ebbs, and there's so much that can be done that way. And I think proving their use at the community level, whether it's urban planning or rural studies, etc., the realism of being there present on planning committees will slowly work their way up into national policies. Regarding the second one, I think you can't just bring in professional development for university professors. They are not going to do. Who's going to do it? But what we need to do is to engage higher education in discussions and around controversial discussions. One of them being what comes after sustainable development. Sustainable development was simply the best we could do in the mid-1980s. It's very human-centric. It has a lot of flaws. And I think one of the things we could do is to engage the university world in post-sustainable development. And that would really engage, I think, professors and so on, right across the entire spectrum of higher education. And then not only addressing them in the vision, but how would we get there? So the idea of transforming teaching, transforming what is the research that we need, and what is the institutional mindset. So I think it's just kind of a far out thought, but something to throw out there. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you very much. In the chat, there was a question by Miandi asking how international organizations can help enhance partnerships and networking between member countries to advance internationalization of universities at the level of a nation. I would like to expand that question. I think it was probably not only to advance internationalization of universities, but also to advance the focus of universities on sustainable development. Maybe that is a question that could go to you, Alexander. So how can organizations also help enhance partnerships and networking between countries?
Okay, no, thank you very much for the question. Of course, as UNESCO and similar organizations, we have our platforms that we make available for international exchange, be they virtual platforms or in times that are different than the current ones, also through network meetings that we regularly organize in Education for Sustainable Development, and where we always have a strong portion of higher education institutions, higher education stakeholders participating. So of course there's these very concrete platforms for international exchange, but I want to say maybe something more with regard to the strategy to pursue. I think one important aspect is that we should make sure that we don't implement sustainability in higher education as a separate track from other processes that are going on. From our perspective, of course, UNESCO with the leadership on SDG 4 on the education sustainable development goal, it is very important to pursue education for sustainable development or sustainability in higher education as part of the platforms that are put in place for SDG 4 coordination. I think one of the dangers can really be with regard to sustainability when a committed community comes together, works together, which is wonderful, of course, but stays separate from the, say, more mainstream of higher education concerns. So I think with regard to strategizing, that is very important, that at the local level, at the university level, at the national level, and then of course that would be more our responsibility at the international level, we make sure that there's a full alignment of these different or seemingly different agendas. So that would be my short comment on that one, Elige. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is linked to another question that was asked at some point that was maybe a little bit on something else yet. It was a question to Shantala, but it was your universities have cooperated with local communities in several fields, and what was the role of the university? That's maybe a big question. The sub question actually relates to this previous discussion. Because the person asking the question said, but this would require a huge team to put in place, for instance, the whole of institution approach. And the person also stated that this probably would involve an enormous amount of money and a very important budget allocation to the very transformation of the institution. And if I may recall some of the debates that we've had in the Global Action Program with UNESCO and the different networks working together, there we've always also made the case that it was not always a matter of money. It was a matter of mindset, and it was a matter of bringing people on board of the dynamics, the philosophy, the mindset, the spirit of sustainable development, and that was something that required actually a whole other kind of dynamic than the financial one. Maybe that you could start, Alexander, and then Shakuntala and Chuck could also react to that and show how, if, for instance, the dynamic at York University, yes, it involves also budget allocation because it requires faculty member time allocation to the project. But maybe you could elaborate on that a little, because the question on money comes back very often.
I'll start with, I mean, like as you suggested, I'll start with 2 or 3 comments, but I think our the Shakuntala and Charles, who speak more really from the university, are probably better placed to say something really substantial about that. So I just have one thought I want to share. I think it's clear that resources are needed, and I think it would be naive to say, you know, we can do all this work through good networking without additional resources. I think that would also not be fair to state that. But I think what is equally important, or even more important, is really the political will in the institution. I mean, the cases that I'm aware of where this whole institution approach has worked well was because, of course, there were many stakeholders within the university who were very much sensitized to sustainable development, but there was also a convinced university leadership that provided the kind of management and also like political leadership to take along the whole university community. And of course, that eventually that also came with increased resources for these processes. But even more important, I think, is really the will of the leadership, to put it like that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Chuck, would you like to maybe start on that one, and then Shakuntala Laskar, you could continue?
Yes, I totally believe about the mindset and about the leadership, but regarding the funding, the traditional way in which universities have been successful is that it is usually started around energy savings, water. You know, it entered into it as eco-efficiency. And that started to produce the funding trend, which could then be reinvested into the teaching and learning. The other big area of start is that sustainability has this mindset of it being about the environment. And so a number of the core faculty who were started with individual subjects in environment or natural sciences and so on. And but from there, as the discussion began, we saw that this is much broader. This goes into philosophy, you know, worldviews and so on. And so it spread then throughout that. But I think the idea of that also Alexander and others have mentioned is you have to move from the dynamic leader who gets associated with what they were able to do at the university. It has to be embedded in policy to survive the change of leadership. So it's quite a long road, but people have to be aware that moving from eco-efficiency and saving money by turning off lights is through to that much broader whole institution approach, and then moving into policy. Thanks.
Thank you. Shakuntala, would you like to pick up on this one? We're conscious of time as well. We only have 10 minutes left for the conversation just starting.
So it depends on the power of willingness, I feel. So when there is a will, there is a way. So that we can manage if you have a will to do. So that's what I feel.
Okay, thank you very much. I see that Amin Hakimi, who is the manager training and career services at Cardan University, is making the case for what to do, or is asking the question, what to do in countries where this is not yet the topic that has been picked up by policymakers or others. Maybe that is also something that we could address. Just as a Shakuntala, could you please mute so that the echo is sorry. Yeah, thank you. That is an important issue as well, because some claim that sustainable development has now been picked up by many governments, many countries around the world, but not by all. So how to bring on board those who are not yet on board? That is one of the questions. The other one that was also posed in the question is how to actually provide for the framework that would allow to go beyond those already convinced, how to bring on board the others, and how to maybe create this whole of institution dynamic and bring others on board. Would you have one or two easier suggestions for universities to pick up the ball? Chuck, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Regarding Amin's question around Afghanistan, first of all, I would love to link with between some universities just to show the realism that sustainability, the world that we want. You know, it's beyond just saving the environment. So the idea of having some other universities enter into this kind of a discussion. Sustainability isn't about the 17 identified goals that the UN could agree upon. I think in Afghanistan, they have to start with the discussions around the world they want. What's preventing them from getting that particular world? What are their immediate issues? What are their needs? And having people start to address it in a small way. So certainly it would come around water. It would come around livelihood. It would come around the realistic things that are there. So I think that would be a great world one. But it is such an important question that I would love to have their university linked to other universities in the north, in the south, etc., to ponder the realism of how do we get engaged and how do we engage other disciplines and so on. Thanks.
Thank you. I see you, Alexander, maybe wishing to pick up on this question.
No, thank you very much. I was just thinking I don't have so much to add really. I had the similar thought. I think we shouldn't get too hung up about sort of the specific terms of the global framework. So the specific this global framework or that global framework. I think it's wonderful to have this government agreements at the global level, and of course it provides a very strong mandate for action on the ground. But when it comes to those who are basically seemingly not doing anything yet, I think that was a bit the background to the question. You just start with the actual challenges that are there. I think it's completely irrelevant if you call it sustainable development or education for sustainable development or something else. You just look at the concrete community or country level challenges that you have, and how can you address them, and then very quickly I think you are at the points that are then at the global level codified in the SDGs. Thanks.
Okay, then I saw also on two of the slides there was a reference that was made to the ranking mechanisms, and somebody, I think it was Albert Schramm, you linked it as well to the work of the accreditation bodies. Would you deem the ranking mechanisms and accreditation bodies, which are actually two complementary modes, to have a specific and very strong role to play to transform the landscape as well? I think, Chuck, you made the case that yes, that it was a very good incentive for many universities to actually look more in detail into what universities do and how they do it, in order to then also inform the questionnaires that were proposed in order for a ranking to come out of it. But that was not the finality, but that the aim was to actually bring the teams on board and discuss. But so maybe on the accreditation bodies and all those mechanisms that are actually out there, that universities listen to. I believe that the question comes a little bit out of that, I'm interpreting here, but that accreditation or ranking mechanisms could be triggers to enhance the take-up of sustainable development agendas in universities. So back first maybe to Shakuntala, you also had a slide on rankings in your presentation.
Yeah. That is, yeah. Can I show you the slide?
Yes, please go ahead. Shakuntala?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay. That is, yeah. That's on life on land. We got the ranking. So I think that encourages you to go forward. Getting a good ranking, it helps to go forward and work constructively and to reach the goals. So,
okay. And think accreditation bodies, would you have something to say about accreditation mechanisms that could help support that dynamic?
Accreditation mechanism, we also have here like NBA, that is for our technical colleges. So that I think is, that will set standard in case, say, for research or even for education. So so it's required. I think it's good to have an accreditation.
Okay. Look, would you like to pick up on that as well, maybe?
Yeah, I think when you look into change management and the theory and so on, you do need targets. You do need measurements. You need to set goals and targets and so on. And but I think where the discussion needs to go is what are the targets, and you know what really needs to be measured, and what are the increments and so on. But I see the linking of the whole monitoring, evaluation, ranking, etc. I want to see that linked to the new discussions around the futures of education, what constitutes a quality education, that whole discussion, the purpose of higher education being revisited and so on. So I think that these two need to be coupled so that we don't just come up with rankings that suit either wealthy universities or universities that have access to huge amounts of government funding or endowments. You know, so how do we put all of this in some sort of perspective? So I see that we do need the rankings as part of change theory, but let's have really in-depth discussions about what constitute the rankings, how do we implement them, how do we report them, and what do universities and countries do with them? You know, so right. That it's not, this isn't a shame game or a bragging road. Thanks.
Very interesting. And Alexander, would you like to add something to this, maybe?
Yeah, I think that rankings can be a sort of a useful incentive as an intermediate step. Of course, whatever helps to incentivize sort of university action, I think is welcome for this type of agenda. We just have, and Charles was alluding to that, we just then have the danger again that we are narrowing the agenda to what is within the ranking. So that's why I would see it as not an ultimate goal to set up a sustainability ranking, but a kind of step in the right direction.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then there are very interesting questions now coming up. Also, how does the current situation, also with nationalism coming up and closing down of countries in context of COVID-19, or even COVID-19 in itself, putting a lot of stress on higher education to do so many other things. How can we prevent that sustainable development will move to the background again, where there is so much already done to advance it? On the contrary, do you see that there would be there is a danger there, and how to ensure that sustainable development is the first priority back on the agenda as soon as rebuilding is being considered? And then another question that I see here, so accreditation, it comes up again, and so that was the other part. Ranking is one, but accreditation is a whole full-fledged mechanism that allows to also check and balance the quality paradigm in higher education. So very important to look at those dynamics. But maybe the question, how in the current context of COVID-19 and everything that universities have to face, and the many tasks and challenges that they are to respond to, is sustainable development safeguarded, and how to ensure that with IAU, with UNESCO, with your good work in the UNESCO chairs and in the cluster, how to ensure that others will see sustainable development as essential to keep high on the agenda now and into the future. So maybe back to any of you who would like to pick up the ball. And then I will have to wrap up, and the other questions will come up later. Shakuntala, would you like to say something, or Chuck?
To say about the carbon footprint. The carbon footprint, it's now improving because of this. So I think it will be indirectly helping to reach the goal. So you understand the carbon footprint that is attached to every individual, that we can calculate out. So that depends on how much you travel, how much you, produce some polluted gas. So all these things are now reduced because of COVID. So I think that way we are actually going towards our goals of the clean, planet.
But I will challenge you on that one, Shakuntala, if I may, because on the other hand, we also need to keep the communication channels open. Very good internationalization opportunities for countries to not move inwards, but stay open to others. And the travel is still part and parcel of the very dynamics of linking up our initiatives from India to Canada to France and to any part of the world. So that's also important. So the hope of the IAU is also that the carbon discourse is not impacting negatively on future opportunity for partnering up, and also to ensure some good dynamics in internationalization that would go beyond internationalization at home, but certainly also bring people together, to bring them out of their comfort zone, really go towards the others, network, have the opportunity to learn about other opportunities, link up, research systems, science systems, intellectual systems, by simply sitting together and have the opportunity to understand the other better by connecting. That's also one of the key areas of action of UNESCO. You bring people together from all around the world, and it's essential to have these conversations online, but certainly also from time to time to have the opportunity to bring people together physically to get to know each other and then embark on further dynamics. Would any of you wish to react to this very quickly, and then I will wrap up?
Yeah, I'll pipe in. I think the idea of looking at the pandemic as a sustainability issue because of how it has affected the general population, the economy, the environment, and so on. It really is a sustainability issue. And so as we seek the next normal, as the next stage, if we have sustainability as a basic principle on what we build back and what we change, and so as an underlying fundamental question that is there, I think this is an opportunity for us to really address it, and the role of higher education in keeping that in both as a philosophical context as well as the practical. How do we deliver fresh water, etc. Thanks.
Thank you, Alexander.
No, just to add that the pandemic has shown us really how important sustainable development is, in the sense of giving us a vision for the future, as Charles has just said, but also analyzing why we are here. Why did this happen? It has to do something with reduced habitat for wildlife, for example, or could have at least something to do with it. So I think there's a lot to learn from the sustainability discourse, also in terms of analyzing how we came here, and then, as was already said, of course, with regard to where we go in the future. I think we're also realizing that to find solutions to the current situation, if we are talking about finding a vaccine, or if we're talking about mitigating the economic impacts, it's only at the international level that we can make any progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Shakuntala, if I may.
So that about the sustainability goal, that's what I will have to wait and see what happens, because the science has not been able to give us the answer. It's very unpredictable, and so far no one has been able to see. The science has failed, in other words. So we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, thank you. I think there are more questions in the chat. We will gather those and we will share them with everyone. There is a good opportunity to engage in further conversation. As you know, this is a series on the futures of higher education, short, medium, and long term. And this is the first seminar session on sustainable development and the role of education and higher education in particular. And we will have 2 other such sessions in the Tuesday webinars to come. So we have a last slide that we would like to share with you, just with some opportunity to find further information that will also be shared with everyone separately after this presentation. So while we look for the last slide, let me already thank all the participants for having taken an active part also in the chat, and for having listened to this very interesting conversation. And certainly let me thank these 3 esteemed speakers, Shakuntala Laskar, Alexander Leicht, and Charles Hopkins, for their excellent contributions to the discussion and to debating how to ensure there is a sustainable future for all, thanks to better education and thanks to reorienting the kind of education that is being provided at all the different levels, including higher education. So here are some of the links where you can find further information from all participants. And we would like to say goodbye and meet you again on 6th October to discuss leading universities in an age of uncertainty. Then on 13 October, one on the UNESCO Global Convention on the Recognition of Higher Education Qualifications and how to there look at moving towards a global and mobile knowledge economy. On 20 October, we will zoom in on digital dimensions and how teaching and learning can be innovated for a better future. And 27 October, higher education under examination. Are we ready to train the future healthcare workforce? And to answer to a comment made earlier, is science and providing the responses that we need. So we look forward to welcoming you back to the webinar series on the Tuesdays to come. Thank you very much for your participation in this webinar.
Thank you to everyone. Goodbye.